Okay, so now we're moving on to the second set or the last set of slides for the choice and demand part. This week, like I said, will not be so much to learn as last week. And for now, the last thing we do for this week is seeing how price changes affect different types of goods, namely the normal goods and inferior goods. Let's go. Then let's start first with the case of normal goods. So it's easier for us to get the intuition. Yeah? But set out first some definition. So normal goods is goods that when you have income increase, when you have more income or more money, you consume more. On the other way around, if you have less income, then you consume less. That's a normal good. And it's actually consistent with what we learned from our introductory microeconomics class, right? Normal case. Okay, so let's see what happens when we have a price decrease with normal goods. We look at substitution effect and then income effects, one after the other. So substitution effect means when it gets cheaper, you consume it more, yeah, relatively to the other goods. So you prefer it better than the other when its price decreases. Yeah. And income effect. So income effect will be consistent with the definition that we just set over here, because price decreases implies that your real income increases, right? You have more purchasing power. Because of that, you can buy more. And in the case of normal goods, you demand it also more. You have more demand of that good. Okay. And the other way around, when there is a price increase, it works the reverse hold. So substitution effect means that, okay, if it gets expensive, you gotta consume other goods than this good, right? And then the income effect implies that your real income decreases. Because of that, the quantity demanded also decreases. So this is quite intuitive for the normal goods case. And that implies that the instant substitution and income effects reinforce one another. So they moved in the same direction. Yeah? Now let's see how it works for inferior goods. So what is inferior goods? Those are when on a certain range of income, when income increases, you consume that good less. So the quantity decreases. And vice versa, when you have less money to spend, or your income decreases, then the quantity will increases. So for me, for example, this for the student, the university student in Vietnam, is often the case that instant noodle is inferior compared to rice. And then in a more general case, in the past, in Vietnam, sweet potato is inferior relatively to rice. I mean, you can laugh about it a bit, but it's actually what happens when, especially in the rural area, when the households are too poor, then they will substitute a lot of rice in their dietary by sweet potato as a form of staple food. And another case is, for example, you sometimes hear that because of economic growth in the recent years, the dietary changes substantially in emerging economies. So they consume more meat and less stable food. So that's a also loosely speaking a form of inferior goods for stable food. Okay. How would it work when price decreases? Substitution effects always the same for either normal goods or inferior goods. When you have price decreases, quantity demanded increases. You prefer it more than other goods when it gets cheaper. That's the first thing. However, income effect now works in different direction. So consistent to this definition, when the income effect of the price decreases imply that your real income or your purchasing power increases. And because of that, the quantity demanded decrease. Okay, so substitution effect and income effects moves in contradicting or opposite direction for the case of inferior goods. And it's not possible to say at the first place whether a price decrease will cause the total quantity demanded, like the sum of substitution and income effect, negative or positive. It's not like with normal good case. And on the other hand, when price increases, you have the reverse, right? So substitution effect implies that quantity demanded becomes less, you prefer other goods better, and the income effect, again in line with the definition, means that quantity demand increases. When I have less money to buy food, I would prefer buying instant noodle or eating instant noodle than rice. It's just like that. However, in some extreme cases, when the price of an inferior good is like increasing strong enough, like the magnitude of the increase is large enough, it can cause the price and demanded quantity to move in the same direction. That is, when price increase, you just consume it more. And this sounds like a paradox already, right? And that actually named after the English economist Robert Gibbs, who observed this paradox for the first time in the 19th century in Ireland for the case of potato. Like when the price of potatoes increases, they just consume more potatoes. And how would that happen in economic terms? Relating to what we just said. Because when price increases so large that the real income decreases very substantially, your purchasing power is just reduced dramatically, that you cannot afford other goods anymore, then you just have to consume more of the inferior good instead to fulfill your need or to satisfy your demand, and the quantity of that good will increase at the end. Now, one example here is, I don't know if you know that, but the Vietnam government, they watch the domestic rice markets very carefully. And sometimes they will even impose the export restriction to secure the supply to the domestic market. So why is it the case? Because, like I mentioned, nowadays with economic growth and income growth, rice has become some sort of inferior goods. So people consume more other food and less rice in general. However, rice is still rice constitutes a large, even the largest proportion in our daily dietary, especially in the rural areas where average income is lower than in the urban area. Okay? So if there is a price shock, people will first of all need much more money to buy the same amount of rice they needed before, right? So if price increases too much, then the remaining budget to get other food will be exhausted. So they don't have much money to spend on other foods like before, for example, meat or fruit or veggies. So then there's a shortage of there's a shortage of consumption from food over there. So they must consume more rice to compensate that shortage. So consequently, the demand for rice will increase a lot.